All right. Welcome to another episode of Connect and Politics. We're here with a special guest. Please introduce yourself by telling us your name, where you're currently located, and your favorite snack.
Okay, my name's David Sanders, and I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina. Um, and my favorite snack probably are a couple of things, not in any particular order, but I love pecans. I could snack on them forever. And there's a mix that I make with pecans and peanuts and raisins and M&Ms, and walnuts, which is my favorite nut um, that I use. The other um, snack that I really like is fruit. I think it would be fruit. Um, I eat an apple a day, and I like Honey Crisp apples, something that's crisp to bite in, and that's kind of it. I'm simple.
Nice, nice. So for the pecans, are these raw? Are these roasted, honey roasted, salted? What?
It doesn't matter.
Nice.
Most of them are raw that I eat. I have roasted them. I have gotten roasted pecans. I'm a chocoholic, so they could be chocolate dipped. Um, it really doesn't matter.
Good, good. What's your fondest memory from childhood?
My fondest memory. You know, that's a long time ago. That's six score years ago. Six score 9 years ago. Let me think. My fondest memory probably that comes to mind first was my baptism, excuse me, my baptism. I was 6 years old, and I recall it to be the happiest day of my life. I was 6 years old. I got baptized on a Friday night during our church revival, which is the end of the revival. And everybody who joined the church that week all got baptized on Friday evening before the service. And what I remember most about the service is my grandmother dressed me in white, had a white sailor suit with white shoes. This is after the baptism. But I felt like running up and down the aisles of the church because I was just so happy, feeling really, really good. I remember that as being um, a really great time in my life.
Nice, nice. Oh, that's good. So how do you think that that time and your general childhood helped groom you into the adult that you became?
Hmm. Well, um, it's probably foundational. Um, um, Growing up, God has always been the foundation of my life. At least that's what I was taught. And what was important about that is that I was to serve Him forever. And as far as I know, I have never not participated in a church. Even during my college life, I had a church that I went to. Um, and it started out being a white church because on our campus, I didn't have transportation, but the only bus that came to the school on Sunday was for a white Baptist church downtown Charlotte. And I got on that bus. It was three black kids on that bus, and sometime a fourth. We got on that bus and we went to that church, Pritchard Memorial Baptist Church. Um, and I'm sharing that just to say that I've never been without it. So God has always been leading in my life, and helping me spiritually to understand who I am. Um, So that's how it has shaped me, I think, which is what your question is. I've been
Yeah,
shaped by having God as my foundation and moving forth throughout those 69 years.
nice. You kind of mentioned this when you were talking about your baptism, but what are some important lessons that you've learned from both your parents as well as your grandparents?
Oh, well, I was actually raised by my grandparents. My mother and I grew up as brother and sister. Um,
Wow.
yeah, the I should have used that as my most memorable time because the most when she tried to be my mother, it didn't work out really well uh, um, because her parents are responsible for me
Yeah.
because I was a teenage. I'm the product of a teenage pregnancy, and so I take my grandfather's name as my family name, and
Wow.
so we grew up as brothers. But my parents, um, being responsible, one of the things I learned to do or not to do very early in life is tell lies. I used to tell lies all the time as a child, as I recall. And I would inevitably, my grandmother would inevitably catch me in the lie. When I got caught, I got a beating. So it was easier not to get a beating by not lying.
Right.
So to this day, I don't tell lies. If it's something I can't tell you, I'll just tell you I can't tell you instead of lying to you. So I don't lie today as a result of that. So that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
But being honest and being accountable for the decisions I've made has been a hard lesson to learn, but one that I have learned in my adult life, and I learned that um, from my grandparents because they were we were very poor, and I didn't know that until I grew up.
Mm.
Sharing with my grandmother when I thought the best times of my life was, and she shared with me after I made that revelation to her was we didn't even know where the next meal was coming from. So I had no idea that I was poor until I
Wow.
was an adult. So um, I've learned to count my blessings
Mhm.
and be thankful for who I am, whose I am, and what I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this kind of ties into the next question, which is something. What's something in your life that you're not willing to live without?
Oh, well, kind of like my daughter, it would be my wife. Um, because we're opposites, she keeps me um, on my toes because she always have a different perspective on a given issue. Foundationally, we are very similar. We believe in God. We believe in accountability and honesty and responsible and all of that. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty kinds of stuff, she's much more comprehensive in her thinking because she values details. I don't value details until I have to. I'm much more of a big picture kind of a person. So we're very opposite. So with she's kind of like my yang, if you will. She fulfills me,
Right. So,
and I can't see myself without that.
yeah, what are your favorite things to do for self care?
Self care, pedicure, manicure, haircut, shave, um, are physical things. Spiritually, getting up every morning, going through the devotional materials, which oftentimes is maybe 2 or 3 chapters in a given book that we're reading that morning for our prayer line, gets me started. It clears my mind. It keeps me focused, and I attribute it to my not being confused with the COVID-19 situation because I don't depend on man's version of it. I depend on God to lead me, and I'm waiting on Him. For example, um, POTUS is trying to open up the country. Well, it's not even close to time to open up the country. I know that, and I don't get caught up in it because I study. And right now in the Old Testament, which is where I'm studying, um, those who are disobedient, which is Israel and Judah primarily, whenever they're disobedient to God's will, bad things always happen to them. And so I believe that spiritually we should not be concerned about opening the country back up um, until we are prepared. So we're not prepared, and so we should wait. And so I'm waiting for God to send us not a sign, but just the answer to what it is that we're supposed to do, because I believe that He will.
And what would you say, what motivates or excites you?
Um, People. I am a people person. I heard my wife tell someone yesterday um, that I don't like to be alone, and that's that's very true. I hate coming to an empty house um, unless it's time for me to be alone. Going back to my health, wellness, and health care, I can be alone when I'm reflecting and need to be restorative to myself. I failed to mention that. But in general, um, like talking to you, I mean, this is great for me because I can see you, I can talk to you, and I love to talk. I'm motivated by the order of the day. Whatever's happening, I go with the flow. I've learned to, in my retirement, I have learned to only do those things that I want to do. And I don't feel guilty about the things I don't do. And so I'm motivated by that. I understand that I don't have to put everything on my plate and try to solve it.
Yeah, that's good. Since you brought up your retirement, what did you do when you were in the professional workforce, and what were some unique lessons that you learned, as a professional?
Um, my profession was human resources. However, the specialty was government. I never worked in human resources for corporate America. I was in government. So I worked for our city, the city of Charlotte, and that's where I retired from. And I retired in human resources. Um, the biggest lesson that I learned, the real biggest lesson that I learned, is that you have to help people the way they want to be helped. That was very difficult um, for me. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you can see someone in need, you can see someone in pain, and your propensity is to go and help them. If they don't want help, you can't help them. So you have to have someone else's permission to help them. Because what I learned is I got mad when I'm trying to help them and they're not paying any attention or they don't care. Well, they don't care because they didn't ask for my help. They may not even want it. And you have to respect that and honor that. So that was my biggest lesson, that you have to help someone the way they want to be helped. And you have to have their permission to do that. Again, it goes back to the path of least resistance. You don't have to get frustrated and feel betrayed when things don't turn out the way you want them to turn out because you're trying to help someone else.
That's a good one. What's one thing you would love to learn that you haven't gotten to yet?
I like to get back to the piano. I stopped playing the piano when I was 5 years old because I got ostracized by my friends. And so I stopped. And now in retirement, that was my goal to start back. And I just haven't done that. And was thinking about this yesterday, well, earlier this week and last week, that I really need to go ahead and get started because that's something I like. Music is something that I like.
So, did I hear that correctly? That you haven't played since you were 5?
Correct.
Wow.
So it's
Oh,
starting all over, really.
yeah, yeah. That should be fun. Um,
It should
what?
be.
Yeah. What have you learned recently that changed your perspective on a subject, product, or an idea? So when I say recent, it could be, anything in the last 12 months.
Uh, Ask it again. I'm not really sure the question.
Have you learned anything in the last 12 months that changed your perspective on an idea, a product, or a subject?
Yes. Yes. I've learned really um, that you can't change something that is all wrong to make it all right when there are a group of people involved. Um, and no matter how frustrated I become, I still can't change it. No matter how I justify it in my mind, I can't make it right because I know that it's wrong. Um, and what I'm learning every day is I have to let it go and let it work itself out. Um, it will either become right, as I think it will, but there are some things that's going to have to happen in order for it to become right. So it's more. It's not an idea. It's more behavior, I guess. It's something that someone is not doing that they should be doing.
Can you think of any advice that you would give your younger self?
Oh yeah. Um, slow down. As I was growing up, I was into everything, trying to save the world. Um, just slow down and smell the roses. You don't have to fight every battle. I would say that to myself now
And
because
oh, you
everything
go.
works itself out.
Yeah.
Pick and
And,
choose.
what's the best advice you've received?
Be yourself. Don't be afraid of who you are or whose you are. And just always be yourself. Be honest to yourself.
Yeah. What has been the toughest thing you've had to tackle, and what helped you get through
Oh, the toughest thing. I'm just trying to pick one. Um,
it? Well, you can pick your
well,
top two.
I always tell young couples who are getting married that it's the second most toughest job in the world is to be married to someone.
What's the
Um,
first?
Raising children,
Okay.
in my mind, raising children because you don't see the fruits of your labor until the children are adults. Um, and what it's important to me, I guess for raising my children, was to help them be able to gather information and make an informed decision about whatever they had to make a decision about. Because every decision that you make has a consequence. And you have to live with that consequence once you make a decision. So my legacy is not money. My legacy is the ability to make decisions and to make good decisions. That's what I've always wanted to leave my children. Um, so those are the two toughest things I think I've had to deal with. The other things that I thought was tough turned out not to be tough. When I was working early on, I was responsible for our drug testing program for the entire city. And we always got audited by the federal government. And on this particular occasion, we had findings, and I had to correct those findings. Well, I thought that was a mountain, and I was afraid of making a mistake because it was the federal government. So it took me a little longer to respond than I should have. And I remember my director saying to me that I didn't do my best work with that. And it was because I was afraid. And I recognized that going through that process. But when it was all said and done, it was over. It really wasn't that big of a deal. And I didn't have to be afraid of the federal government. I needed to tell them what they were doing, where they audited us, and they were wrong. Yeah. That was the big thing. So those things are temporary. You know, a job is just a temporary station in life. Yeah. You were looking for that job when you got there, and you're going to be looking for another one. And you'll get that one, and you'll stay there for however long. But, you know, so I'm just saying all of that to say there were difficult times in my life, but for the most part, most of them were temporary. But being married and having children are not temporary. Yeah. You will always have children. You will always be married until you're not. Yeah. And so for both of those, for both the raising kids and, you know, being in a relationship, what helped you get through both of those? Communications, I think. Being able to talk, not always agreeing. I know when it was with the children, we had an agreement that we may not agree on the approach, but in front of the kids, we would always agree and be on one front. That worked probably 80% of the time. Because sometimes you have to take different roles. So because we're opposites, it worked really well for us. Well, I forgot what else I was going to say. So, no, that's good. What qualities or character traits do you admire in other people? What qualities or traits do I admire in other people? Oh, that's a good question. I haven't had that question in many, many years. I admire in other people their ability to be transparent when they're supposed to be. I don't believe in absolute transparency because I think there are times you shouldn't be transparent. But if you come to me and you're putting on airs and you're just not, and you're being phony, that's just, that strains the relationship. So it's going to be a while before I begin to trust you. So their ability to create trust in the environment or in the interaction or in the relationship. So the trait that I admire most is having someone be approachable, where you can talk to, communicate with, and be honest and open in it rather than put on airs.
Yeah. When I say forgiveness, what comes to mind?
Strength. It requires a lot of strength to forgive, particularly to forgive someone that you are close to. Whether it's the person you're in relationship with, your spouse or your mate or your partner, whatever the situation is, your children, your siblings, those are hard. Those pieces are hard to forgive, but not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So it requires a lot of strength, a lot of courage, and most importantly, a lot of willingness to do that. And I think it's a necessary activity that has to occur in any relationship.
As a parent, what values did you intentionally try to foster or imprint in your kids?
God, family, work. God first, so that he could lead the family and a sense of family, a sense of belonging. I always felt that that was really, really important. It's critical. Family is critical. Somebody that you can depend on, somebody that's reliable, somebody that's going to tell you the truth when you really need to hear it, but you may not want to. Somebody that's going to support you and support your dreams. That's family. And work. Work with a caveat. Work not on a job, but at something that you really have passion about and around, and something that you really love. Don't get caught up in work, because everybody. What I didn't share with you as it relates to my work, I also ran the grievance program, which was the program where employees came to complain.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to a lot of people complain about coming to work and what they had to do just to get to work. And I would always tell them that they needed to change their business address. If it takes that much for you to come to work, then this is not the place for you. You need to go find yourself another job. You laugh, but I always said that to them. Because if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to survive. If you don't have passion around what it is you're doing, you're going to be miserable and frustrated, as evidenced in that line of work. Yeah, some of the people took me up. Some of the people stayed there. Some of the people did stay there and suffered until they got fired.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So for a fun question, if you won the lottery tomorrow, what will you do?
Ooh. How much is the lottery? Do you know?
Yeah, it's 500 million.
Oh, that much.
Yeah.
Well, what would I do? I would probably thank God first. And then I'd come up with a strategy on what to do with the money. And remember that my new friends are really not my friends. Mm-hmm. But in all earnest, I would I would endow my grandchildren. That would probably be the first thing I do, is to endow them to make sure that they get an education that is as free as they can get, that they won't have to pay for anything. I would um, the chapter that I started at the university for my fraternity, I would endow a scholarship there for a deserving student. In this case, it would be a young man who maintains some high ideals that I set up to get the scholarship. Um, I would probably spend some of it on myself, I would imagine. And I'm not really sure what I'd do with the rest, but I wouldn't run out and buy a car. I would probably move, but I would downsize instead of getting a bigger house.
Mhm.
I would downsize. I think we were at that stage where we need to downsize. Um, I'd have fun. I'd have fun. I would endow my church. I would leave some money to the church and make it perpetual. Um, yeah, 500 million, that's a lot of money.
That's good. Uh, for for our final question, how do you define success?
Oh, well, simply put, I think it's more simple than most people make it. You're successful when you have accomplished that thing that you've been striving for, and you can look back and pat yourself on the back because you've done such a great job in getting there.
Mhm.
Um, and that includes coming through failures to get there because you didn't give up, you persevered. Um, but you just never lose focus of whatever that something is, whatever that dream or whatever that goal is, and you reached it, and you did a good job at reaching it. I, that's what's successful,
It's a great,
and you're proud of
great,
it.
yes, yes. It's a great way to finish. Well, we connected in politics, and we will definitely do this again in the near future. Thanks.
Okay, well, you didn't ask me anything about politics. I was all prepared to talk about the president, but maybe that's another time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a part two, focus just on politics.
Okay. But thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate being asked.
Thanks. Thanks.